They were just a couple in hoodies trying to go on vacation. But to the flight crew, they were budget tickets, worthy of nothing but laughter and scorn. The crew laughed at them, denied them service, and even refused medical help, all while fawning over a rich passenger in first class. They thought their power was absolute. But they made one mistake. They had no idea who they were really talking to, and in a matter of seconds, a single, hidden badge would bring their entire careers and the airline's reputation crashing down. The hum of Los Angeles International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar kind of chaos. It was the sound of 1,000 goodbyes and 1,000 hurried hellos, a symphony of rolling luggage wheels on linoleum and filtered gate announcements. For Marcus and Dr. Alani Williams, it was supposed to be the white noise that signaled the start of a long overdue escape. They stood near Gate 42B, bound for Honolulu. The flight was packed, awaiting Global Link Airlines, jumbo jet visible through the sprawling glass windows. Alani, a pediatric surgeon whose hands were more accustomed to surgical steel than a suitcase handle, leaned her head on her husband's shoulder. She wore a simple, elegant set of charcoal grey cashmere sweats. No logos, no flash. Just comfort. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her face free of makeup. She looked, to any casual observer, like a woman tired and ready for a long flight. Marcus wrapped an arm around her. He was broader, a solid presence in a well-worn, faded black Howard University hoodie and cargo shorts. He was a man who listened more than he spoke, his eyes perpetually observant. To the world, they were just another black couple, blending into the anonymity of travel. "I cannot wait to feel sand that isn't attached to a playground," Alani murmured, her voice tight with exhaustion from a 72-hour shift she'd just completed. 2 weeks, Lani. Nothing but you, me, and umbrella drinks. No pages, no reports, Marcus replied, squeezing her shoulder. His job, which he vaguely described as compliance for the Department of Transportation, was equally draining, filled with endless reports and an exhausting amount of bureaucratic friction. This vacation was a pressure release valve for them both. "Now boarding, Group 4, a tinny voice announced. They were Group 5. They always booked basic economy for personal travel. Marcus, in his line of work, knew the system. They had paid extra for adjoining aisle and middle seats in an exit row for Alani's long legs and her type 1 diabetes, which sometimes required her to get up suddenly. Finally, Group 5 was called. They joined the last straggle of passengers. The gate agent, a man in his late 20s with a name tag that read Gary and an air of profound irritation, scanned Alani's boarding pass. Beep! A harsh red light flashed. Beep! He scanned Marcus's. Same result. Gary let out an exaggerated sigh, not even looking at them. "Computer's flagging your seats," he mumbled, typing furiously. "Yeah, looks like we had an aircraft swap. Your pre-selected seats, 22B and 22C, don't exist on this plane's configuration." Alani stiffened. "Oh, well, can you please find us 2 seats together? We paid for—" Gary cut her off, his eyes still glued to the screen. "You paid for a request. Basic economy fares are subject to reassignment. It's in the terms of service you clicked yes to." Standing next to Gary, observing the boarding process, was a tall, sharp-featured flight attendant. Her uniform was impeccably pressed, a silk scarf tied in a perfect knot. Her name tag read, Marina, Purser. She gave Marcus and Alani a slow, dismissive, up-and-down look. Her eyes lingered on Marcus's hoodie, and her lips pursed in a look of clear distaste. "What do we have left, Gary?" Marina asked, her voice a high-pitched, imperious drawl. "Just 38B and 41E, Gary said, still typing. "Middle seats, separate, back by the lavs." "We'll be separated?" Alani asked, a note of real concern entering her voice. "Sir, I have a medical condition. I really need to be seated with my husband." This finally made Gary look up. He shared a glance with Marina. It was a micro-expression, a tiny shared smirk that lasted less than a second, but it was unmistakable. Marina stepped forward, taking charge. "Mom," she said, her voice dripping with false patience. "Everyone has a condition when their budget ticket doesn't get them what they want. This is a full flight. You can either take the seats assigned, or you can be rebooked on the next available flight, which," she glanced at Gary, "looks like Thursday," Gary chirped, his customer service smile suddenly bright and malicious. Marcus held up a hand, his voice calm. "We'll take the seats." He could feel the humiliation radiating from his wife. This was not about the seats. It was about the way it was done, the assumption, the immediate dismissal. "Thank you for your cooperation," Marina said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Please move along. You're holding up the last of the boarding." As they walked down the jet bridge, Marcus's hand on the small of Alani's back, they heard Marina's voice, now a stage whisper to Gary. "Unbelievable. Dressed like they're going to the gym, but expecting first-class service. They're lucky to be on the plane at all." Gary's snicker followed them into the aircraft. Marcus's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but his eyes were recording. The casual cruelty, the gate agent's name, the purser's ID which he'd clocked as she leaned in. Marina J, 88, 12G. He was an FAA investigator, and his vacation, it seemed, was already over. The seats were as bad as advertised. Alani was in 38B, a non-reclining middle seat wedged between a broad-shouldered man who immediately fell asleep and a young mother with an infant. Marcus was 3 rows back, in 41E, another middle, pinned between 2 teenagers playing a video game on a shared console, their elbows flying. He could see the top of Alani's head. She was trying to read a medical journal on her tablet, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. This was a 5.5-hour flight. The cabin doors closed, and Purser Marina began her welcome announcement. Her voice was a perfect blend of warmth and authority, a complete fabrication. "On behalf of Global Link Airlines and this entire Honolulu-based crew, we'd like to welcome you aboard." Marcus watched her. She moved through the cabin with a proprietary air, the queen of her aluminum tube. She was assisted by 2 other attendants. One was a kind-looking older man, James, who worked the front galley. The other was a young woman in her early 20s, Chloe on her name tag. Chloe seemed to shadow Marina, mimicking her movements, her expressions. She was a follower, eager to please. 90 minutes into the flight, the drink service began. By the time the cart reached Alani, she was already starting to feel the telltale signs. The long shift, the stress at the gate, the cramped seat. Her blood sugar was beginning to dip. She felt the first tremor in her hands, the light sheen of cold sweat. "Mom." "Drink?" Chloe asked, not unkindly. "Yes, please. Could I have a full can of orange juice? And a Biscoff cookie, if you have it?" Alani asked, her voice quiet. Chloe nodded and was about to reach for it when Marina glided up from behind, placing a manicured hand on the cart. "Chloe, dear, you're being too generous," Marina said, loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "The full cans are reserved for our Comfort Plus and first-class passengers. Standard economy gets a half-cup pour." She turned her smile on Alani. "It's policy. We have to make sure we have enough for everyone." "I understand," Alani said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I'm diabetic. My sugar is dropping. I really do need the full can." Marina's smile tightened. She leaned in conspiratorially. "Oh, honey, If I had $1 for every time someone on a basic fare suddenly developed a medical condition to get an extra snack, I'd be sitting in first class with them. She poured a small plastic cup half full of orange juice and slid it onto the tray. Here you go. Alani stared at the cup, her face pale. This isn't enough. It's what we offer, Marina said, her voice turning to steel. Now, if you'll excuse us. She pushed the cart past. From 3 rows back, Marcus had seen the entire exchange. He saw the single, pathetic cup. He saw his wife's hand trembling as she drank it. He saw her rummaging in her bag for the glucose tablets she always carried. But then he saw the flash of panic on her face. In the rush to leave the hospital, she'd repacked her carry-on, and her main supply was in her checked bag. She had only a small, near-empty tube. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood, a 6'2" frame in the narrow aisle, and the cabin suddenly felt smaller. He made his way to his wife's row. "You okay, Lani?" he asked, his voice low. She looked up, and he saw the fear in her eyes. "Marcus, I left my tablets. This juice isn't enough. I'm really not feeling well." Marcus nodded. He turned and walked directly to the back galley. Marina and Chloe were there, their backs to him, sorting trash. Their voices were low, but in the confined space they carried. "Can you believe the nerve?" Marina was saying. "That woman in 38B. I'm diabetic," she mimicked in a high-pitched, mocking tone. "Pulling a medical scam for 50 cents worth of juice." "I know, right?" Chloe giggled, a nervous, high-pitched sound. And her husband, staring daggers. Like, "What are you going to do? You bought the cheap seats. You get the cheap service." "That's exactly right," Marina affirmed. "They're just not our kind of people, you know. They try to make trouble, try to get a free voucher. You just have to be firm and put them in their place. Watch me." Marcus stepped into the galley. "Excuse me." The 2 women spun around, their laughter dying on their lips. Chloe's face went white. Marina's expression, however, hardened into one of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Sir, you need to return to your seat. The fasten seatbelt sign is on," she lied. It was off. "It is not," Marcus stated calmly. "My wife, Dr. Williams, in 38B, is having a hypoglycemic event. Your crew member denied her a full measure of juice, which she stated was for a medical need. I am informing you now. She is a physician. She is a type 1 diabetic, and you will provide her with 2 full cans of orange juice and any other sugar you have. Immediately." Marina crossed her arms. She looked him up and down again, her gaze lingering on the university logo. "Sir, I am the purser on this flight. I decide what service is rendered. I already gave your wife her allotment. If she has a pre-existing condition, she should have traveled with her own supplies. Her poor planning is not my emergency." "This is a medical situation," Marcus said, his voice dropping, becoming preternaturally calm. "This is a direct request for a medical accommodation under the Air Carrier Access Act. I am giving you one last chance to comply before this becomes a formal incident." "A formal incident?" Marina laughed, a short, barking sound. "Oh, I'm terrified. What are you going to do? Write a bad Yelp review? You are interfering with a flight crew. That is a federal offense, sir. Now, if you do not return to your seat this instant, I will have the captain radio ahead and have you arrested upon landing." She smiled, a triumphant, vicious expression. She had him. He was just another angry passenger, another problem to be managed. "This is your final warning," she spat. "Go, sit, down." Marcus just looked at her. He didn't move. He simply held her gaze. "Okay," he said, his voice a soft, dangerous rumble. "Okay, You've made your choice." He turned, not toward his seat, but toward the front of the plane, where the other, older flight attendant, James, was working. Marina watched him go, a look of stunned disbelief on her face, before it morphed back into rage. "That's it!" she shrieked, grabbing the intercabin phone. "I'm calling the captain. You are done!" Marcus ignored Marina's shriek. He moved through the narrow economy cabin, acutely aware of the eyes on him. The passengers who had overheard the galley confrontation were whispering, some looking sympathetic, others annoyed by the disruption. He passed through the curtain into the small Comfort Plus section, and then into the relative calm of first class. The ambiance changed instantly. The lighting was softer, the carpet thicker. The older flight attendant, James, was leaning over a passenger in seat 2A, a man in an expensive-looking linen shirt whose voice was carrying throughout the front cabin. "I don't care about airplane mode," the man, Mr. Henderson, slurred, waving his phone. "I'm closing a deal here. This is worth more than this entire plane. Just bring me another double black. Neat. And be quick about it." Mr. Henderson was clearly intoxicated. His face was flushed, his words thick, and he had a half-empty tumbler of whiskey on his tray. "Sir," James said, his voice polite but firm, "I really must ask you to put your phone on airplane mode, and I'm afraid I can't serve you any more alcohol." "Can't? Can't?" Henderson laughed. "I'm a million-miler, son. I know Alan Joyce. I know the CEO of this airline. What's your name? James? Well, James, you're about to be back in economy if you don't get me that drink." At that exact moment, Marina stormed through the curtain, her face a mask of thunder. Her eyes, however, lit up when she saw Mr. Henderson. The rage she held for Marcus vanished, replaced by a fawning, saccharine smile. "James, dear, why don't you go check on the rear galley? I'll handle this," she said, dismissing him. James, looking relieved and disgusted, nodded and moved past Marcus. "Mr. Henderson," Marina cooed, touching the man's shoulder. "Is everything all right? I'm Marina, the purser." Marina? Finally, someone with some sense. This manservant refused to get me a drink. "And he's hassling me about my phone," Henderson complained, gesturing petulantly. Marina laughed, a light, tinkling sound that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Oh, don't you worry about a thing. We'll make an exception for you. Of course. Another double black? See? That's service." Henderson grinned, patting her hand. Marina turned, and that's when she saw Marcus, standing silently at the boundary of the first-class cabin. Her smile evaporated, replaced by a look of pure loathing. Here was the source of her problems, daring to invade her sanctuary. "I told you to return to your seat," she hissed, marching up to him. "You are now in an unauthorized cabin. This is your absolute final warning. I have already informed the captain of your disruptive behavior." Before Marcus could even reply, Alani's call button, 38B, chimed insistently. Ding, ding, ding. A different sound, a human one, came from the back. A small cry of panic. "Help! Please, somebody!" Marcus pushed past the stunned purser. He didn't run, but he moved with a speed and grace that was terrifying. He was back at 38B in seconds. Alani was slumped in her seat, her skin ghostly white and clammy. Her eyes were unfocused, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the empty water cup. "Lani, stay with me," Marcus said, his voice sharp, professional. He grabbed her wrist. Her pulse was thready, rapid. The man next to her, the one who had been sleeping, was now wide awake. "Whoa, man, is she okay? She's shaking all over. I need sugar, now!" Marcus roared, his voice booming through the cabin. This was no longer a request. It was a command. Chloe arrived, her face pale with fright. What? What's wrong? My wife is in hypoglycemic shock, Marcus snapped. Your purser denied her medical service. I need every can of orange juice and regular soda you have. Move! Chloe, galvanized by the sheer, unadulterated authority in his voice, scrambled back to the galley. Marina arrived a second later, her face livid. What is all this commotion? You are frightening the passengers. You did this, Marcus said, his voice low and trembling with a tightly controlled rage. He was kneeling in the aisle, cradling Alani's head. I told you she was diabetic. I told you she needed sugar. You denied her. I gave her juice, Marina stammered, the first crack appearing in her composure. Passengers were now standing, craning their necks. Phones were out, recording. You gave her half a cup and a lecture, Marcus shot back. Chloe reappeared, her arms full of juice and full-sugar Coca-Colas. Here! Marcus ripped the tab off a can of orange juice. Lani, honey, I need you to drink. Drink this. All of it. Alani, barely conscious, sipped, her teeth chattering against the aluminum. Marcus helped her. He rubbed her back, his voice now gentle. That's it. Come on, baby. Stay with me. After a few long, agonizing swallows, a little color returned to her cheeks. Her shaking began to subside, but she was still weak, disoriented. Marina, seeing the situation had turned, immediately shifted into damage control, but not out of concern, out of self-preservation. Well, she said, straightening her uniform, I'm glad that's resolved. As you can see, passengers, the situation is under control. Please return to your seats. She then turned to Marcus, her eyes narrowed to slits. When we land, you and I are having a word with security. Faking a medical emergency to get free drinks and scare the cabin is the end of the line for you. She actually believed it. Or more accurately, she needed to believe it. She needed to be the victim, the one in control who had been challenged by a problem passenger. Marcus Williams slowly stood up. He was a full head taller than her. The engine's drone seemed to fade away, and the cabin went utterly silent. The passengers watched, holding their breath. Alani, now conscious and breathing more evenly, looked up. Marcus, don't. It's okay, Lani, he said, not taking his eyes off Marina. He looked at the purser. The man who had been a calm, hoodie-wearing husband was gone. In his place was something else. Something cold, precise, and infinitely more dangerous. You, Marina began, raising a finger. I'm issuing you a final written warning. For what? Marcus asked. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the air. For interfering with a flight crew? Or for saving my wife's life from a flight crew? You're done, she whispered, her face twisted in a mask of triumph. You're going on the no-fly list. No, Miss Jenkins, Marcus replied. You are. Marina froze. The use of her last name, which was not on her name tag, was the first pebble in an avalanche of dread. What did you call me? Marina Jenkins. Employee ID 812G, Marcus stated, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. You've been a purser for 14 years, based out of Honolulu. You have 3 commendations for sales, and 12 passenger complaints for rude or dismissive behavior, all of which were dismissed by your direct supervisor. Marina's blood ran cold. This was not on any public record. Who are you? Your colleague, Marcus continued, his eyes flicking to the terrified younger attendant, is Chloe Adams, ID 92, year 44T. She enabled your behavior. The gate agent at LAX was Gary Price, ID 23C. He violated ACAA protocols by reassigning my wife's medically necessary seating without consultation. You're recording me, Marina stammered, looking for a phone. I don't need to, Marcus said. He reached into the cargo pocket of his shorts, bypassing his wallet. He pulled out a worn, black leather billfold. It didn't look like much. He didn't flash it. He simply opened it and held it up. Inches from her face. There, set in a gold recess, was a gleaming badge. United States of America Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration below it, his photo ID, Williams Marcus J., Senior Safety and Compliance Investigator, Field Office 774B. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered from the galley, her hand flying to her mouth. Marina's face, which had been a mask of smug rage, simply collapsed. The color drained from it, leaving a waxy, pale sheen. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The entire narrative she had built in her head, of a budget passenger, a scammer, a thug in a hoodie, had just been obliterated. Seconds later, the title had promised, and here it was, the moment the world shifted. "Purser Jenkins," Marcus said, the title Purser now sounding like an indictment. "This is an official FAA field audit, and you, your crew, and your gate agent are in violation of a frankly stunning number of federal aviation regulations." He let the badge hang open as he began to list them, his voice as calm and rhythmic as a surgeon listing instruments. 1. Violation of 14 CFR Part 121.2575, which explicitly forbids serving alcohol to a passenger who appears to be intoxicated. Mr. Henderson in 2A is not just appearing, he is drunk, loud, and you offered him more. 2. A clear and catastrophic failure to comply with the Air Carrier Access Act by first denying a requested seating accommodation, and then, and this is the one that will end your career, actively denying medical aid to a passenger who declared a disability. 3. You and Ms. Adams engaged in discriminatory service practices. Your comments in the galley, which I and several other passengers overheard, regarding my wife and me based on our perceived economic status and, let's be blunt, our race, demonstrate a clear prejudicial bias that directly impacted air safety. 4. You failed to enforce sterile cabin rules, allowing Mr. Henderson to use a cellular-connected device during flight. 5. And my personal favorite, you attempted to falsify a passenger disruption report to intimidate me, a federal officer, and to cover your own gross negligence. He snapped the wallet shut. The snick of the leather was the loudest sound in the cabin. Marina's knees buckled. She literally grabbed the seats to hold herself up. No, this is entrapment, she finally hissed, her voice a desperate, cracking whisper. You set me up. You people. You always. Ma'am, Marcus said, and now his voice was angry, a cold, righteous fury. We are passengers. We bought tickets. My wife is a doctor who saves children's lives. We are on vacation. You profiled us. You laughed at us. And you almost put my wife in a coma at 30,000 feet because you didn't like my hoodie. He turned to Chloe, who was openly weeping in the galley. Ms. Adams, get my wife a blanket, a bottle of water, and 2 more cans of juice. And then you will go to Mr. Henderson in 2A. You will confiscate his drink, you will ensure his phone is off, and you will inform him that any further non-compliance will result in his arrest upon landing. You will do this by the book. Do you understand me? Yes. Yes, sir. Mr. Investigator, sir. Yes. Chloe practically fell over herself to comply. Marcus then turned back to Marina, who looked like a hollow shell. As for you, you will go to the forward galley. You will not interact with another passenger. You will not speak to any crew. You will sit on the jump seat and you will wait. I am going to have a word with your captain. Marina's eyes widened in sheer terror. The captain... You can't... I can, Marcus said. He pulled out his personal cell phone. He toggled on the in-flight Wi-Fi, which he'd paid for at the start of the flight. And just so we're clear, he typed a rapid text message. Vance, Code Red Audit, GLA 451, Gross ACAA violation, 121,075 violation, active crew discrimination, in-flight medical event caused by crew. Need team on ground at HNL. I want execs. Meet me at the gate. He hit send. The message delivered. It's done, he said. He then looked up the aisle toward the cockpit. Now, let's go see the man in charge. The walk to the front of the plane was different this time. The curtain to first class was pulled back. Passengers, both in economy and first, stared at Marcus with a mixture of awe, respect, and shock. The narrative had been flipped so violently, it left them all breathless. The man in 2A, Mr. Henderson, was now being spoken to by a trembling Chloe, who was pointing at his glass. He was protesting, but the fight had gone out of him. He'd seen the badge, too. Marcus reached the cockpit door. He pressed the small call button. A moment later, the door clicked open. The first officer, a young man, peered out. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm Investigator Williams with the FAA," Marcus said, holding up his credentials. "I need to speak to the captain. Now." The first officer's eyes went wide. Yes, sir. Please come in." Marcus stepped into the cockpit. The captain, a grey-haired man with R. Miller on his name tag, turned in his seat. "What's this about, sir?" Captain Miller asked, his voice a calm baritone. "Captain Miller," Marcus began, "I'm on an active audit. Your purser, Ms. Jenkins, is an immediate and critical flight risk. She has, in the last 90 minutes, violated 2 major federal air regulations. She denied medical aid to a passenger, my wife, after being informed of a diabetic condition causing a severe hypoglycemic event. She then actively served an already intoxicated passenger in 2A. Captain Miller's face, which had been calm, darkened. "She what?" "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "her actions were motivated by clear racial and class-based discrimination, which I and other passengers personally overheard. When I confronted her to get medical help for my wife, she threatened me with arrest and attempted to file a false passenger disruption report. Your purser has compromised the safety of this cabin. I am ordering her relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight." Captain Miller looked at his first officer, then back at Marcus. He was a professional, a veteran pilot, and he knew the gravity of what he was hearing. An FAA investigator on his plane making these claims. "Investigator Williams," Miller said, his voice grim. "I am appalled. My first priority is the safety of this flight. I was told by Miss Jenkins there was a disruptive passenger in the back. She lied to me." "Yes, she did. Your other attendants, James and Chloe, are... Well, James is fine. Ms. Adams is complicit, but following my instructions now. Ms. Jenkins is to be confined to a jump seat. She is not to interact with anyone. I've already messaged my team. We'll have a reception for you, her, and the airline executives when we land in Honolulu." Captain Miller nodded curtly. "Understood. I'll have James take over as lead. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, investigator. And please, accept my profound apologies for your wife. Is she stable?" "She is now. No thanks to your crew," Marcus said, the ice in his voice not melting. "I will handle this, sir," Miller said. Marcus nodded and stepped out of the cockpit. He returned to his row. 38B. The man in the aisle seat had insisted on swapping with him. "You need to be with your wife, man," he'd said. "What I saw, that was insane." Marcus sat down next to Alani. She was sipping her juice, the blanket wrapped around her. The color was back in her face, but she looked exhausted and shaken. "You okay?" he whispered, taking her hand. She managed a weak smile. "You and your government job. You couldn't just tell me you were auditing the flight? I wasn't, he said, his voice tight. This was supposed to be vacation. I was off the clock. They forced my hand, Lani. When you... He couldn't finish the sentence. The thought of what could have happened. I know, Alani said, squeezing his hand. Thank you. But, Marcus, that was intense. You were scary. I was, he agreed. I was terrified. The remaining 2 hours of the flight were the quietest, most tense flight Marcus had ever been on. Chloe and James worked the cabin, their movements robotic, their faces pale. They offered free drinks and snacks to everyone, their voices barely whispers. Marina was visible to anyone walking to the front lavatory. She was strapped into the forward-facing jump seat, her face turned toward the wall. She didn't move. She just stared at the bulkhead, a statue of her own ruin. As the plane began its final descent over the sparkling blue waters of the Pacific, Captain Miller's voice came over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in Honolulu in just a few minutes, due to an in-flight incident. We will be met at the gate by airline representatives and federal authorities. We ask that all passengers remain in your seats, even after the seatbelt sign is turned off, until the authorities have boarded and secured the cabin. We apologize for the delay and thank you for your cooperation. A ripple of whispers went through the plane. Alani looked at Marcus. Federal authorities? You? My supervisor, Marcus said grimly. And the airline's lawyers. This is the calmer part, I think. The wheels touched down in Honolulu. The plane taxied to the gate, the Aloha music playing over the speakers, a sickeningly cheerful soundtrack to the drama that was about to unfold. The engine spooled down. The jet bridge connected with a heavy thunk, and then silence. Everyone waited. The wheels of the Global Link jumbo jet kissed the tarmac at Daniel K. Inouye International Airport with a gentle chirp. But inside the cabin, there was no relief, no celebratory unbuckling. As the plane taxied past panoramic views of Diamond Head and the sparkling Pacific, a sickeningly cheerful ukulele and steel guitar Aloha track began to play over the PA system. The music was a grotesque counterpoint to the dead, suffocating silence in the cabin. Every passenger sat, rigid, staring forward. Even the teenagers who had been playing video games were still, their console dark. Alani's hand was ice-cold in Marcus's. He rubbed her knuckles, his gaze fixed on the forward bulkhead, where Marina Jenkins sat strapped into her jump seat, a living statue of her own ruin. The engines spooled down. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed off, but not a single person moved. Then came the heavy thunk as the jet bridge connected, followed by the hydraulic hiss of the cabin door being unlocked. Captain Miller's voice came over the PA, devoid of its earlier warmth. Ladies and gentlemen, as stated, we will be met by authorities. Please, for your own and for our safety, remain seated and keep the aisles clear. Do not attempt to use your mobile phones to record. The authorities are now boarding. The door swung open. It was not a smiling gate agent. The first man to board was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit that seemed to suck the light out of the cabin. His face was a mask of cold, professional anger. He was followed by a shorter, paler man in an expensive but rumpled Global Link Airlines suit, his face glistening with sweat. Flanking them both was a uniformed officer from the Honolulu Airport Police. Robert Vance, Marcus murmured to Alani, his voice just for her. My boss, the FAA's regional supervisor. Alani let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. This was real. Vance's eyes swept the cabin, instantly cataloguing the fear, the curiosity, the tension. He spotted Marcus and Alani in row 38. His gaze softened for a fraction of a second. He nodded, a sharp, curt acknowledgement. "Investigator Williams. Dr. Williams. I'm glad you're both safe." "Mr. Vance," Marcus acknowledged, his voice carrying in the silence. "Appreciate you coming." The sweating airline executive, whose PIN identified him as R. Davies, VP of In-Flight Services, rushed forward. "Investigator Williams, Dr. Williams, on behalf of—" Vance put a hand on the man's chest, stopping him mid-sentence. "Not yet, Mr. Davies. This is my scene." Vance's voice was a deep bass that needed no microphone. He turned his attention to the front galley. "Ms. Marina Jenkins." Marina's entire body flinched, as if struck. She fumbled with the complex jump seat harness, her movements clumsy. She finally unbuckled and stood, but her legs seemed unsteady. Her face was a ruin. The professional mask of the purser was gone, her makeup streaked by tears of terror, her eyes red and puffy. "Ms. Jenkins," Vance said. "I'm Regional Supervisor Vance, Federal Aviation Administration. Ms. Chloe Adams?" Chloe, who had been hiding in the rear galley, emerged. She was trembling so violently she could barely walk, her face pale and tear-soaked. She looked like a child, not a flight attendant. "You two will retrieve your personal belongings. Immediately," Vance commanded. "As of this moment, you are both suspended, effective immediately, pending a full federal investigation. Your airline and FAA credentials are hereby revoked." He held out his hand. The airport police officer stepped forward with 2 evidence bags. Chloe, openly sobbing, fumbled at her lanyard and dropped her ID badge into the bag. But Marina found one last tiny ember of her former self, one last desperate, pathetic flash of defiance. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, her voice a cracking, hysterical wail. "It's not fair. This is entrapment. He set me up. He came on this plane looking for trouble." The cabin gasped. Even Vance seemed momentarily stunned by her sheer audacity. He wouldn't say who he was," Marina continued, her finger jabbing toward Marcus. It's reverse discrimination. Just because we... She couldn't even form the words, her entire twisted narrative collapsing in on itself. Vance did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, and his voice was so cold it burned. "You are not being suspended for reverse discrimination. You are not being suspended for your feelings. You are being suspended for 1. A clear and documented violation of 14 NASA CFR Part 121 or 5705 by serving an intoxicated passenger, and 2. The gross, negligent, and catastrophic denial of medical aid to a passenger after being informed of a disability, a direct violation of the Air Carrier Access Act." He took a step closer. "You did not fail a customer service audit, Ms. Jenkins. You failed a safety audit. You put a passenger's life at risk. You are done." The words, "You are done," hung in the air, absolute and final. Vance then turned his glacial gaze on the sweating executive. "Mr. Davies, this is your plane. This is your crew. This is your mess. This airline is now facing a formal inquiry and fines that will likely reach 7 figures. My investigator's report details a pattern of behavior, a culture of discrimination, and a complete failure of your safety protocols." Yes, sir. We will cooperate." "Fully, of course," Davies stammered, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "And there's one more," Marcus said, finally standing up. The cabin's attention snapped to him. He pointed toward the front. "Mr. Henderson in 2A. The belligerent drunk had his face turned to the window, pretending to be asleep. The airport officer was on him in a second. "Sir, you'll need to come with me." "What? Get your hands off me," Henderson sputtered, his voice still thick with alcohol. "I'm a 1,000,000-miler. I'll have your job. I know. You're being detained for in-flight intoxication and interference with a flight crew under federal law, the officer said, pulling the man's hands behind his back with practiced ease. The click of the handcuffs was shockingly loud. You can tell your friends at the airline all about it from the airport holding cell. As Henderson was hauled, stumbling and cursing, to his feet, Vance signaled to the officer, "Escort all three of them off." The walk of shame was excruciating. Mr. Henderson went first, his linen shirt stained and rumpled. Then came Chloe, her face buried in her hands, her sobs echoing. And then, Marina. She walked with her head held high, a last desperate attempt at dignity. But as she passed the rows of passengers, she was met with 200 faces of cold, silent judgment. No one whispered. No one sneered. They just stared. The weight of their collective contempt was more punishing than any shout. She looked at Marcus and Alani as she passed. Alani met her gaze, not with triumph, but with a profound, weary sadness. Marina was the first to look away. After they were gone, the cabin seemed to exhale. Vance turned to the passengers. "Folks, the incident is concluded. We apologize for the delay. You will be free to deplane in a moment. However," he said, his voice rising, "if any of you," and he made eye contact with the rows near 38, "witness the interactions in the rear galley or the medical event at row 38B, please see the agents at the gate. We are taking official statements." At that, a half-dozen passengers stood up immediately. "I heard it all," said the man who had given up his seat. "She called them budget tickets. She mocked that woman for being sick." "I got it on video," said the teenager from row 40, holding up his phone. "The way she talked to them, the way she refused to help. It was messed up." Vance nodded, a look of grim satisfaction. "Thank you. Your statements will be crucial." He turned back to Marcus and Alani, his demeanor finally shifting. The boss was gone, replaced by a concerned colleague. "Marcus, Dr. Williams, I have a car waiting for you on the tarmac. You are not dealing with the terminal. It will take you directly to your hotel. We'll handle the full debrief tomorrow. Go. Get your vacation. You've been through more than enough." Marcus nodded, his shoulders slumping slightly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only bone-deep exhaustion. He turned and gently helped Alani to her feet. He pulled their 2 simple carry-on bags from the overhead bin. As they stepped into the aisle, a strange sound started. It was a single passenger in row 39, a woman who began to clap. Slowly, tentatively. Then the man in row 37 joined in. Then, in a rushing wave, the entire economy cabin was on its feet. The plane, which had been a chamber of fear and silence, erupted in a thunderous standing ovation. It wasn't just applause. It was a release, a thank you, a shared acknowledgement of a profound wrong being made right. Alani's eyes filled with tears, and she blushed, overwhelmed by the sudden, powerful show of support. She gripped Marcus's arm. Marcus, his face stoic, but his eyes shining, simply raised his free hand and gave a single, small wave of acknowledgement. He put his arm around his wife's waist, and they walked down the aisle, through the curtain, and off the plane. Not as budget tickets, but as the 2 passengers who had, in their own quiet way, landed the plane. The story did not end when they stepped off the jet bridge into the humid, floral-scented air of Honolulu. It was, in many ways, just beginning. While Marcus and Alani were quietly escorted to a private car, the incident on Flight 4521 was already exploding. The passenger video, the one showing Marcus kneeling in the aisle, calmly listing federal violations as Marina's face collapsed in terror, was already live on TikTok, on X, on every platform that thrived on instant, dramatic justice. By the time they checked into their hotel in Maui the next day, the clip, titled FAA Incognito Shuts Down Karen Flight Attendant, had 12 million views. They sat on the lanai of their room, the turquoise ocean sprawling before them, a picture of tranquility that neither of them felt. Alani, her hands finally steady, was checking her glucose monitor. The number was stable. She was safe, but she was shaken. "It's everywhere, isn't it?" she murmured, looking at her phone, not at the ocean. I look so. "You look like a victim of her negligence," Marcus said, his voice a low growl. He was on the phone with his supervisor, Robert Vance, pacing the length of the balcony. "Yes, Robert. The full report will be on your desk by Monday. Yes, I've cross-referenced the witness statements, and tell legal I said no." He hung up, the tension radiating from him in waves. "They want me to be the face of an FAA Cares campaign," he said, rubbing his temples. I told them absolutely not. "Good," Alani said. "This isn't about fame. It's about—" God, Marcus, she really would have let me go into shock. All for what? A hoodie? A seat assignment? The reality of it was sinking in deeper than the applause or the triumphant ending on the plane. It was a cold, terrifying truth. "It was never about the hoodie, Lani," Marcus said, sitting beside her, finally taking her hand. "It was about power. She thought we had none, so she used hers. That's the sickness, and it's not just her." The call they were waiting for came on the second day of their vacation. The caller ID read, "Global Link Airlines, Executive Office." Marcus put it on speaker. "This is Williams. Investigator Williams. Mr. Williams. This is Richard Davies, Executive VP of In-Flight Services. Sir, I cannot begin to express the airline's profound apologies for the abhorrent treatment you and Mrs. Williams received." Alani's eyes narrowed. "It's Dr. Williams," she said, her voice cutting, clear and cold. "And I'd prefer you don't call this treatment. It was endangerment." Davies, on the other end, audibly stammered, Yes, of course, Dr. Williams. You are absolutely correct. We are just horrified. We've seen the videos. We've read Investigator Williams's preliminary report. Ms. Jenkins and Ms. Adams have, of course, been terminated. Mr. Price at LAX as well. This is not who we are." "It's exactly who you are," Marcus replied, his voice flat. "It's who you've allowed your staff to be. Your purser has 12 prior complaints, Mr. Davies. You didn't care because they came from passengers you and she deemed unimportant. You just got caught." Davies, realizing he had no defense, moved to his only option. "Well, to compensate you for your distress, and to show our commitment to making this right, the airline is prepared to offer you both a personal settlement, $500,000, tax-free, a private apology, of course, and lifetime platinum status. $500,000, enough to buy a small condo, enough to wipe away student debt, enough to make most problems disappear." Marcus and Alani looked at each other. Not a single word passed between them, but the understanding was absolute. "Mr. Davies," Alani said, taking the phone, "we don't want your money." "We don't," Marcus affirmed, his voice layered over hers. "But we are going to tell you what you're going to do with it." There was a long, stunned silence on the other end. I don't understand." "You're going to use that money, and a lot more, to fix this," Marcus said. "You're going to create a foundation, and you're going to fund it with $3 million. $3 million, Davies squeaked. "That's the starting figure," Alani continued, the passion of a physician who has seen too much disparity entering her voice. "We're calling it the Williams Global Link Foundation for Air Carrier Accessibility and Safety. Its sole purpose will be to create new, mandatory training modules for every single one of your employees, from the gate agent to the CEO's office. It will focus on non-discrimination, on implicit bias, and on the critical, non-negotiable importance of passenger-declared medical needs," Marcus added. "My wife is a doctor. She saves lives. She was treated like a liar. This training will ensure that 'I am diabetic' is met with 'What do you need?' not with a snide remark about budget tickets." Davies was trapped. The story was viral. The FAA was preparing a fine that would make his head spin. This was his only way out. It wasn't just a solution. It was a PR miracle. "Yes," he said, his voice now filled with a desperate, manufactured enthusiasm. "Yes, of course. A foundation. It's brilliant. We'd be honored. The corporate machine, once exposed, moved with terrifying speed. The official FAA fine still came down. $2.2 million for Global Link Airlines, one of the largest in history, for ACAA and passenger safety violations, citing a systemic culture of crew negligence. Marina Jenkins was ruined. Her termination was the least of it. The FAA permanently revoked her flight credentials. The internal investigation, spurred by Marcus's report, unearthed a long, ugly history of profiling. She was blacklisted. No carrier would ever hire her for an in-flight role again. The karma that hit her wasn't loud or explosive. It was a quiet, grinding, and absolute end. The last Marcus heard, she was working at an LAX duty-free shop, selling $200 bottles of perfume, forced to watch the giant jets, her former kingdoms, take off without her, day after day. Chloe Adams, terrified, had cooperated fully. She sent a 10-page handwritten letter of apology to Marcus and Alani, detailing the toxic, follow-the-leader culture Marina had fostered. "I was so scared of her, I forgot to be human," she wrote. Alani, against her better judgment, felt a pang of pity. Chloe was fired, but the FAA allowed her to seek recertification after completing 200 hours of sensitivity and safety training provided by the new Williams Foundation. Gary Price, the gate agent, was fired and demoted to the baggage ramp at LAX, a non-customer-facing role where his casual cruelty could do no more harm. Marcus's report became a legend at the FAA Training Academy in Oklahoma City. It was now required reading for all new investigators, a landmark case study that, for the first time, drew an undeniable, federally recognized line between soft prejudices and hard safety failures. He had redefined air carrier negligence, and on the last day of their vacation, Marcus and Alani sat on a black sand beach. The foundation was in the hands of lawyers. The news cycle had moved on. It was just them and the sound of the waves. "So," Alani said, leaning her head on his shoulder, a genuine, non-alcoholic piña colada in her hand. "That was eventful." "It was," Marcus agreed. He watched the surf pull back, revealing the glistening volcanic sand. "Do you think they'll really remember? Do you think any of it will stick?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. He thought of Marina, selling Chanel to travelers. He thought of a new hire flight attendant, somewhere in a classroom, reading his report. "I think," Marcus said, "they'll be training new recruits with our story for the next 20 years. In a way, we'll be on every flight. They'll remember us." Alani smiled, a real, relaxed smile. The exhaustion of the last 2 weeks finally melted away, replaced by the warm Hawaiian sun. "Good. That's good." She took a sip of her drink and looked at him, a mischievous light in her eyes. But just so we're clear, from now on, I'm flying first class." Marcus threw back his head and laughed, a real, genuine, joyful laugh that was carried away by the ocean breeze. "You got it, Dr. Williams. You've more than earned it." They thought they were just laughing at a couple in cheap seats. They didn't realize they were discriminating against a doctor and mocking the very man who enforces the rules of the sky. Marina's prejudice didn't just cost her a job, it cost her entire career and cost her airline millions. It's a hard lesson, but a real one. The person you look down on today might be the one with the power to ground you tomorrow. Karma in this story wasn't just a twist, it was a federal regulation. What did you think of Marina's shocking behavior? Have you ever seen an employee with a power trip get put in their place? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life drama. Click that bell so you never miss an update.